Welcome to Expresso ConSciêncIA, the podcast where science and strategy meet to explore how innovation can shape a more sustainable future. I'm Liliane, sustainability strategist at Smart Cycle, and my goal is to help professionals and companies turn environmental and social challenges into practical opportunities for growth, resilience, and impact. Each week we invite a remarkable voice who are not only thought leaders but also change makers, bringing science, finance, and real-world transformation. Today I have the pleasure to speak with Amina Bang Skanse, a professional with over 25 years of experience in business development, strategy, and sustainability across the Nordic region. Amina brings a unique perspective, connecting investment and lending with reality of a small and medium-sized enterprises that want to make sustainability part of their core business strategy. So, Amina, it's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you. For an SME that wants to start integrating ESG into its strategies, where should they begin, and what steps are essential before approaching investors or financial institutions?
Yeah, so basically I think most of the companies listening in now actually have sustainability efforts already done. I mean, sometimes you maybe not name it as a sustainability initiative, but that's another thing. So I think maybe to go back to your original business, trying to find out, what could actually be linked, and as you mentioned, to the E, S, or G, or all three of the parameters, of course. And then I think if you're a producing company, it makes sense to look into the products, of course, that you produce and how the value chain looks like. And then, of course, if you are providing services, you probably have a stronger focus on employees or employees in the value chain. So I think most of the time you actually already done some work or applied some policies and stuff like that. So now it's about integrating it and make sure you know how do you describe your sustainability efforts, and of course then finding what are the gaps, what are you missing in your strategy to make sure that you really aim all three parameters. And when you go to a financing meeting or investment meeting, of course, I mean, it's essential to describe how have you actually integrated in your work. Have you set any KPIs? Is it integrated in the business plan? What are the boards of directors? What are they giving you a sort of overall strategy? But I don't think you always need to have a lot of KPIs, a lot of things in place, to be honest, because I mean, we are expecting from a finance perspective that, you started the work and you have made some commitments. And we can see in studies in Sweden that many do have a goals. I think it's around 85% actually of the SMEs have goals. But of course, the following up part is lagging a bit. So I think don't feel stressed about it, that you don't have, all place in orders when you approach investors or financiers, because they will understand that. But the essential part is, of course, that you started the work and you have a plan for the work. So I think that's my message on that.
Yeah.
So start digging and continue the work.
Yeah, that's such a helpful perspective, especially for companies that may not have formal ESG structures yet. If from a leader's perspective, what kind of evidence or data makes a difference when SME applies for sustainability-linked financing?
Yeah, so I think that actually different banks have different concepts for supporting the transition, and of course dependent on the bank that you already have a relationship with or in the market that you're acting in, you could probably find that out fairly easy. But I think many banks do have something called transition finance. And usually I would say it's about an energy transition. So basically saying, we're using fossil fuels now, but we will shift that to something else, non-fossil. And then, of course, there will be savings, usually in costs. I mean, that's the most essential part, but of course also for the climate impact. So that is, I think, something that you very concrete can look into and also get financing for. Of course, if you are working with innovation or bringing new techniques into your production chain, I mean, that's also something, of course, that you can bring up and discuss with your bank and see if you can get some financing around that. And then I guess the KPI would be, also reducing CO2 impact and maybe also the use of virgin materials or something else that's very concrete as well. So I think that maybe aim one part of your business and start there and then continue and see how you can set up a financing plan. But I would say that energy and maybe transportation as well, if you're using fleets in somehow in your value chain, that's also a fairly easy way to go and get finance for, and you can also brand it as a transition finance as well.
That's interesting. It really shows how transparent data and credible metrics are becoming like the new currency of trust, and access to the capital. And what advice would you give to a professional or a business leader who wants to position their company for ESG-based funding opportunities, especially if they don't yet have a dedicated sustainability department?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, of course, it feels a little bit like you need a sustainability department, but on the other hand, if you are a SME, you probably don't have a sustainability department. So I think it's coming back to the business strategy as well, and maybe to give an example, you can say that you want to reduce virgin materials in your production site, let's say 10% or something like that. And then, of course, then you can start to work towards that goal and find out how should we do that. And you can, of course, also use circularity as a measurement as well and see how much you actually can reuse in your production cycle. So I think there are ways to do this, again, very concrete, very connected to the original business. I think that's probably the core message as well. Don't maybe not try to find a lot of things outside the core. Start with the core, and I think that's also where you will find the most materiality or your impact possibility as well, and go from there. So I think that, of course, it varies, of course, and maybe to translate it to service companies, because maybe you can say, but what can I actually contribute? But usually you can, and I worked with lawyers and that part as well, but there you are coming back to who do you actually do business with, how do you conduct business with maybe partners that are a little bit tricky to evaluate what you do then. So I think there are different sorts of metrics that you want to add, and due diligence could be one of these, of course, and another can be more concrete with the production or the way you produce things. So I think, again, coming back to what are you actually doing, and also think about where do we think we can have the most impact. And then, as some of you already know, you should also look into and find out how is the society impacting us as well, and then you probably will come back to climate-related risks, but it could, of course, be ethical risks as well. I think that, for instance, the invasion of Ukraine also showed that, or put in a new perspective on who do you actually conduct business with, and so on. So, there are a lot of parameters, but again, what are your company offering, and how can you relate that to the E, S, and G?
It highlights how even small steps can create a momentum where there's clear purpose and direction. So yeah, that's very interesting. Can you share examples of financial mechanisms or programs that have successfully supported SMEs in becoming more sustainable, particularly in the Nordic region?
Yeah, sure. I think when it comes to the Nordic region, as I mentioned, I think it's been a lot focus on energy transition. And that means, of course, or producing sectors then, of course, but also related to transportation. And actually in our part, it's been different sort of subsidiaries from the government, but also different sort of grants that you actually can apply for. And usually how that could work is you get some part of the money from the bank, and you get some part from the public sector. And of course, knowing this is a European audience, you have to look into how it works in your country. But that's of course something that you most probably can bring up with your bank as well, because they will probably know how it works in your country. Then, of course, you also have some parts related to innovation. I shouldn't forget about that as well, which could be used to, as I mentioned, maybe find out new producing models or reducing the impact in different ways. So that's another way of finding capital, so to speak, and implement it in your business. And I would say, I mean, the capital structure that is different, but usually it's some sort of loans or a grant. It doesn't have to be more complicated. You don't have to do a sustainable bond. I mean, that's pretty unusual if you're a small company. So again, I think coming back to the metrics for your company and bring that to the bank or the public sector if you also want support from them. I can also mention that, I mean, there are at the European level, of course, the European Investment Bank actually have some different sort of grants as well, where you also can use sustainability metrics related to your own company. And I'm sure I will see a revision of new ads coming in place, and maybe also the purpose of the Clean Industrial Deal, where you also have a large part of innovation and competitiveness, of course, because that's something that, of course, want to enhance in the European market as well. So I think it's possibilities both on a European level and on a national level. Again, I think it's very much about showing when you apply for these types of grants or public money, to show your commitment and what you want, what sort of gap you want to close in your business, and maybe also the possibility to partner up with other companies. Could be in the same sector, but could also be in different sectors, to develop new ways of doing things. So I think very broadly about how you can find these different types of initiatives and trying to proceed. But I think it could be a good idea sometimes to apply together, because if you're a small company, it could be hard to drive maybe that loan. And then maybe also to look into the business organizations that are also different in different countries, but maybe to get support and find out more about how you can get access to capital related to sustainability metrics as well. But I think that's for the Nordic region. I think many, even the SMEs, are actually showing now how much fossil-free energy they are using, for instance, and that's of course because they've been able to implement solar cellars or something like wind power or whatever in the energy mix, and that has also reduced the costs.
That's a very great examples, like how regional collaboration and financial innovation can really accelerate the sustainability transitions for this smaller business, no? So as AI becomes a part of everyday business, what should SMEs prioritize to ensure their data is accurate, secure, and how can these responsibles using the AI strengthen both trust and ESG performance?
I'm not an AI expert either, but my point of view is, of course, that it's very much about automatization and having large data sets, and then of course you can use AI to help you out with that. So that's of course very helpful, especially if you have. It could also be that you have a lot of different partnerships or production sites, for instance, even if you're sort of SME or smaller companies at least. So that's very helpful. But then I think you come to the critical issue, and that is how do you own the data and how do you save the data? And I think at least here in the Nordics is a lot of discussion because but a lot of data is actually saved in the US. So how does that impact the possibility for us to use the data when we want it, and of course the risk of maybe being shared where we don't want it to be shared? So that's of course something to consider. But I think that you have to do it step by step again, like with bringing the sustainability agenda into your company as well. So I would say use AI, but then of course make sure that you also sort of secure how does the AI works for the data that you actually put in. And then I think is another thing, given the geopolitical environment that we are in, to consider how secure is it coming in a European context. I'm not saying it has to be European, but maybe to think about that, and especially if you work with the public sector, for instance, I think there will be requirements how you actually use these tools as well, and where you save your data. And it just makes sense. That's further down the line. So maybe not jump to the conclusion AI will solve everything, but I think as a tool, but also you need to have two pairs of eyes on looking into the data sets as well. But I think it's also, when you use these kinds of models, you also have to consider, does it bring value to the development of the company? Otherwise it's, it could be fun just to say the data, but to be honest, is it a data set that we actually will integrate in our decision making, and will it help us to grow and be more profitable during a long period of time? You always have to consider that as well. And then you can play around with AI and the data, but of course, from a business perspective, I think that's important as well. And not just saying, but we used AI to do this. For me, it's not, okay, but then it's secured everything. Then I probably have more questions. How do you use it, and how do you save it, and so on?
Yeah, that's such an important angle, especially as data-driven tools becomes central not only for reporting, but for decision making, as you say, and credibility also with investors.
Exactly.
Yeah, so Amina, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. It's inspiring to see how financial strategy, sustainability, and responsible innovation can come together to empower those SMEs, not just to comply, but to lead. So before we close, I'd love to hear one final message from you, perhaps a piece of advice or encouragement for business leaders who are just starting their journey toward more sustainable and data-driven decision making.
Thank you for a good conversation as well. I think that given that it's the United Nations Day today as well, go back to the Agenda 2030 is probably the advice. And I know that when you look into the measurements, sometimes, I mean, the Agenda 2030 was built for the full society, so businesses, public sector, and so on. So sometimes it might be hard to find the correct measurement maybe in the agenda, but I think it also gives inspiration at least to think about what sort of metrics can we have for the areas where we can impact the most. And then you align that with your business strategy, and I think you are on your way, to be honest, to integrate it and also get that long-term perspective and profitability ahead. So wishing you all good luck with that.
Thank you so much, Amina. And to our listeners and viewers, if today's conversation gave you ideas or inspiration for your own company, I invite you to take a next step, like join the Smart Cycle workshops, a hands-on experience designed for professionals who want us to apply not only artificial intelligence for efficiency, but like for risk reduction and strategic advantage, not in theory, but in action. You'll find all the details and registrations link in the episode description and on my social media. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe, share with someone who is passionate about innovation and sustainability, and stay tuned to our next conversation. So see you next time.